The shape of thought, a Buddha reflection. I didn't realize how much of my life I was reacting to things that never actually happened. A look, a pause, a simple sentence, and my mind would quietly turn it into something more, something personal, something certain. And before I knew it, I wasn't responding to the moment anymore. I was responding to the story I had built around it. But what if that story isn't true? In this reflection, I want to explore a different way of seeing. Not by changing the world outside, but by noticing how the mind shapes what I believe is happening. Because somewhere between what occurs and what I think it means, there is a space. And in that space, something begins to soften. The story you didn't notice. There are moments when something small happens, and yet something large moves inside you. A message arrives without warmth. A face turns away too quickly. A silence lingers longer than expected. And almost immediately, something within you begins to explain it. You may not notice it at first, but a story has already begun. The Buddha understood this quiet beginning, not as something dramatic, but as something ordinary. The mind does not wait. It fills space the way wind fills an open field. And within seconds, what was simple becomes layered. What was neutral begins to lean. You begin to feel something, not from what happened, but from what it now seems to mean. And if you look gently, without rushing to correct anything, you may begin to see this question forming beneath the surface. Did the moment change, or did the mind shape it? There is no need to answer yet. Just notice that something has already been created. The mind that leans. The mind rarely rests in the center. It leans. When it longs for something, it softens the world, makes it more hopeful than it is. When it fears something, it hardens the world, makes it more threatening than it may be. In both cases, it is not seeing clearly. It is adjusting reality to fit an inner movement. The Buddha saw this not as a flaw, but as a pattern. You may notice it in a conversation. Someone speaks briefly. Their tone is light, almost empty of intention, yet inside you, something reacts. It feels cold, or distant, or slightly sharp, and before you realize it, the moment is no longer what it was. It has become what it feels like. Like water that takes the shape of the vessel, the mind takes the shape of its own tendencies. And when it leans, it carries perception with it. You are no longer just seeing, you are interpreting. And still, this is not a mistake. It is simply something to be seen. When feeling becomes truth. The mind paints the world, then believes the painting is real. There is a quiet confidence in thought. When a feeling arises, it brings a story with it, and that story often feels certain. If something inside you tightens, the mind quickly explains why. It does not say this is a possibility. It says this is what happened. And the body responds as if it were true. The Buddha pointed to this with great gentleness. Not to remove feeling, but to soften its authority. Imagine hearing a neutral sentence. One mind hears calmness. Another hears disapproval. A third hears distance. The same words, yet three different worlds. Which one is correct? If you stay with this question, not intellectually, but quietly, something begins to loosen. You begin to see that the certainty of feeling is not the same as clarity of perception. Feeling is real, but what it claims may not be. And in that small recognition, space begins to open. The space before meaning. There is a moment, very brief, where experience has not yet become interpretation. You may not have noticed it before. It is subtle. A sound is heard. A movement is seen. A word arrives. And for a fraction of a second, there is only that. Then the mind moves. The Buddha did not ask you to stop the mind. He simply invited you to notice this space. If you begin to rest your attention there, even lightly, something changes. The urgency to explain softens. The need to decide what something means begins to loosen. A person walks past you without greeting. The mind says something immediately. But if you pause, just for a breath, another possibility appears. And then another. Not because you are forcing optimism, but because you are no longer trapped inside the first story. This is not confusion. It is clarity beginning. You are no longer reacting to meaning. You are observing it form. The quiet editing. The mind does not show you everything. It edits. It selects certain details, emphasizes them, arranges them into something that feels coherent. And once the story is complete, it presents it as if it were the whole truth. The Buddha saw this editing clearly. You may remember a conversation and feel certain about what it meant. But if you look closely, you will notice how much was added. Tone was interpreted. Intention was assumed. Silence was filled. The event was simple. The experience became complex. Like a painter choosing which colors to highlight, the mind chooses what to keep and what to ignore. And slowly, a narrative forms. There is no need to resist this. Stories help you move through life. But when the story becomes reality itself, something tightens. You begin to live inside the interpretation rather than within the moment. And that is where confusion quietly grows. Insight and Awareness Quiz. After you have listened, open the quiz tab. The questions reveal how you interpreted what you heard and invite you to notice the hidden logic in your reactions. Then, share your score in the comments. Identity in the background. What you protect shapes what you see. Behind many stories, there is something being protected. An idea of who you are. Someone competent. Someone kind. Someone overlooked. Someone unworthy. These identities are often quiet, but they influence everything. The Buddha observed how deeply this runs. If you see yourself as capable, a mistake may feel like injustice. If you see yourself as unlikable, a neutral moment may feel like rejection. The mind adjusts reality to preserve the image. Not consciously, gently, automatically. And so, the world becomes a reflection, not of what is, but of what must be maintained. When you begin to see this, something softens. You realize that the tension is not only in the moment, but in what the moment threatens. And as that becomes visible, identity loosens its grip, not through effort, but through understanding. You no longer need every moment to confirm who you think you are. The reaction that follows. Once the story is believed, the emotion follows. If the mind says this is rejection, sadness may arise. If it says this is disrespect, anger begins to move. And yet, if you look closely, the emotion did not come directly from the event. It came from the meaning placed upon it. The Buddha pointed to this not to deny emotion, but to reveal its roots. A single moment can create many different reactions, depending on the story attached to it. And once you begin to see this, you realize something quietly powerful. You are not always reacting to life. You are often reacting to interpretation. And this is where freedom begins to appear, not by changing emotion, but by seeing what gives rise to it. When the story softens, the reaction often follows. The pause that changes everything. There is a small shift that changes the entire experience. Instead of immediately believing the thought, you notice it. That person ignored me. The thought appears, and for the first time, you do not follow it. You do not reject it either. You simply see it as a thought. The Buddha described this as awareness that does not cling. In that moment, something remarkable happens. The thought loses its solidity. It becomes one possibility among many. Perhaps they were distracted. Perhaps they did not see you. Perhaps nothing was intended at all. This is not about choosing a better story. It is about seeing that the first story was never certain. And in that seeing, space opens. The mind becomes less rigid, less defensive, more curious. And curiosity carries far less weight than certainty. The gentle return to what is. See what is present before what is imagined. When the mind settles, even slightly, attention returns to something simple. What is actually here? A tone of voice, a set of words, a moment unfolding. Without the added layers, the experience becomes quieter. The Buddha's way was always this simple, not easy, but simple. To return again and again to direct experience, to what can be seen, heard, felt, without rushing to complete the picture. When you practice this, even in small moments, life begins to feel less heavy. Not because it has changed, but because it is no longer being amplified. Drama begins to dissolve, not through effort, but through clarity. And in that clarity, the present moment becomes enough, not perfect, but unburdened by what was added to it. The illusion of fairness. There is another story the mind tells, more subtle, more persistent. That life should be fair. You may not say it directly, but you feel it when things do not align. When effort does not lead to reward, when kindness is not returned, when outcomes feel uneven. The Buddha saw the quiet suffering in this expectation. Life does not organize itself around fairness. It moves through countless conditions, many unseen, many beyond control. And when the mind insists that things must balance, tension grows. You may feel resentment, not only toward others, but toward life itself. But if you look closely, the pain is not only in what happened, it is in what was expected. And as that expectation becomes visible, it begins to loosen. Not because fairness disappears, but because the demand softens. You begin to meet life as it is, rather than as it should be. From protest to clarity. When something feels unfair, the mind protests. It asks why. It searches for reasons. It wants to restore balance. And often, it becomes trapped in a loop that has no resolution. The Buddha did not dismiss this feeling. He simply redirected attention. Instead of asking why this happened, you begin to ask, what is the wise response now? This shift is quiet, but profound. The first question looks backward, searching for justice. The second looks forward, grounded in presence. And when you move in this way, something changes. The weight of the situation lightens. Not because it has been resolved, but because you are no longer resisting it. Clarity replaces protest. And from clarity, action becomes possible, not driven by resentment, but guided by understanding. The unpredictable flow. Life does not promise order, only movement. There is a deep desire for things to make sense, to follow a clear path, to unfold in a way that feels structured. But life rarely moves in straight lines. It bends, it shifts, it surprises. The Buddha observed this as a natural quality of existence. You may notice how discomfort arises when things feel uncertain. Plans change, outcomes blur. The future becomes unclear, and the mind begins to tighten. It wants order. It wants to know. But if you stay present, something else becomes visible. Even in uncertainty, life continues. Breath flows. Moments unfold. Small steps remain possible. And slowly, the fear of disorder begins to soften. Not because life becomes predictable, but because you no longer require it to be. You begin to move with it, rather than against it. The strength of not knowing. There is a quiet strength in allowing uncertainty. Not as resignation, but as openness. The Buddha did not ask you to understand everything. He invited you to see clearly what is here, even when the larger picture is unknown. When you stop demanding immediate answers, something shifts. Curiosity replaces anxiety. Patience replaces urgency. You begin to trust that clarity will come, not all at once, but in its own time. And in that trust, the mind becomes steady. Uncertainty no longer feels like a threat. It becomes a space in which life is still unfolding. And you remain present within it, not lost, but attentive. The softening of control. As stories become visible, as expectations loosen, another layer reveals itself. The desire to control, to shape outcomes, to secure certainty, to ensure that things move in a certain way. And when this control is not possible, tension arises. The Buddha saw that this tension is not in the world, but in the grasping. You may notice how much effort goes into managing what cannot be managed, and how little peace it brings. But when control softens, something unexpected appears. A quiet intelligence. You begin to respond rather than force, to move with conditions rather than against them. And in doing so, life becomes less of a struggle. Not because it is easier, but because you are no longer resisting its nature. Seeing without distortion. Freedom comes not from changing the world, but from seeing it clearly. At some point, something becomes simple again. The mind still thinks, stories still arise, but they are lighter now, less convincing, less urgent. You begin to see them as movements, not truths. And in that seeing, reality becomes clearer, not perfect, not controlled, but unfiltered. A moment is just a moment. A word is just a word. A change is just a change. And within that simplicity, there is space. Space for calm. Space for understanding. Space for a kind of quiet freedom that does not depend on how life unfolds. You are no longer trapped inside interpretation. You are present with what is. And in that presence, something gently resolves, not because it was fixed, but because it was understood. This is Buddha Reflections, where philosophy, insight, and lived experience meet to explore mind, impermanence, and release. The conversation doesn't end here. Visit the quiz tab and share your score in the comments. Thanks for your time. It's been a delight. What should we explore next? Comment, share, and save your insight. Subscribe to Orbital Dharma and keep your thoughts bright.